Welcome to my channel. I am Daisy, your hostess. In this video, we are going through the book titled Thought Power, Its Control and Culture by Annie Besant. This was a recommended reading by U.S. Anderson from his book titled 3 Magic Words, which I do have in my book playlist. I personally have fascination for topics on thoughts, the power of thoughts, because I believe that as we harness the power of our thought, we can further enhance our own visualization and learn how to concentrate our thought and therefore begin to manifest more things in our lives. And in that, I am sure that there are many others like me. So in that quest for more knowledge, till we can learn how to harness the power of our thought and use it to better our lives, is my intention to bring this to the channel. So the universal complaint, which comes from many people, are that they have problems concentrating. And it seems to me that in this generation, there's many children that have ADD, attention deficit disorder. And I'm not sure if this was something of the past. And I believe that we are at a critical point where we must take back the ability to think, the ability to ponder, the ability to daydream, and the ability to concentrate and focus that concentration of our thought. And as we do that, we can regain more control of our lives and the things that we want to do. Before I go on to the next chapter, there are about 3 points that I took away from the previous chapter on the obstacle to concentration. And it seems that when people are trying to learn how to concentrate, or they're into meditation, that's one of the biggest problems, that they have a lot of chatter inside their heads. The author in the previous chapter offered exercises that will help people eliminate those obstacles that are coming into the head. And she suggested that people who are training their minds should maintain an attitude of steady watchfulness with regard to the thoughts that are coming into the mind. And my whole thing on that is that I don't believe that we need to be in training to be watchful. We should be watchful at all times. I mean, have you ever asked yourself, sometimes when you get a weird thought, it's like, why was I thinking about that? How did that happen? And kind of trying to make the associations. Was there something that triggered that thought? Or how did it randomly just show up in your mind? And sometimes being able to establish whether the thought is one that's going to elevate you or one that's going to drag you down, and then what do you do to counter that? The author did offer exercises that would help with those situations should they arise. And by doing that, you will also learn how to create the firewalls that you need to avoid the negative thinking or eliminate thoughts that do not need to take harbor at your gate. The author closed out her previous chapter by stating that the concentrated intelligence and the power to withdraw from all the turmoil will actually increase energy for you, the person, and also give you more self-control and serenity, and stated that the person of meditation is one who wastes no time and scatters no energy and misses no opportunity. And those are things that I wish for you as much as I wish for myself. And so with a calm and serene mind, let's sit back and see what other golden nuggets this author can share with us as I flip the page to the next chapter. Thought Power, Its Control and Culture by Annie Besant. This book is in the public domain. Chapter 9, The Strengthening of Thought Power. We may now proceed to turn our study of thought power to practical account. For study that does not lead to practice is barren. The old declaration still holds good. The end of philosophy is to put an end to pain. We are to learn to develop and then to use our developed thought power to help those around us, the living and the so-called dead, to quicken human evolution and to hasten also our own progress. Thought power can only be increased by steady and persistent exercise. As literally and as truly as muscular development depends on the exercise of the muscles we already possess, so does mental development depend on the exercise of the mind already ours. It is a law of life that growth results from exercise. The life, our self, is ever seeking increased expression outwardly by means of the form in which it is contained. As it is called out by exercise, its pressure on the form causes the form to expand, and fresh matter is laid down in the form, and part of the expansion is thus rendered permanent. When the muscle is stretched by exercise, more life flows into it, the cells multiply, and the muscle thus grows. When the mental body vibrates under the action of thought, fresh matter is drawn in from the mental atmosphere and is built into the body, which thus increases in size as well as in complexity of structure. A mental body continually exercised grows, whether the thought carried on it be good or evil. The amount of the thought determines the growth of the body. The quality of the thought determines the kind of matter employed in that growth. Now, the cells of the gray matter of the physical brain multiply as the brain is exercised in thinking. Postmortem examinations have shown that the brain of the thinker is not only larger and heavier than the brain of the plowman, but also that it has a very much larger number of convolutions. These afford a much increased surface for the gray nervous matter, which is the immediate physical instrument of thought. Thus, both the mental body and the physical brain grow by exercise, and those who would improve and enlarge them must have recourse to regularly daily thinking, with the deliberately chosen object of improving their mental capacities. Needless to add that the inherent powers of the knower are also evolved more rapidly by this exercise, and ever play upon the vehicles with increasing force. In order that it may have its full effect, this practice should be methodical. Let a man choose an able book on some subject which is attractive to him, a book written by a competent author containing fresh, strong thought. A sentence or a few sentences should be read slowly, and then the reader should think closely and intently over what he has read. It is a good rule to think twice as long as one reads, for the object of the reading is not simply to acquire new ideas, but to strengthen the thinking faculties. Half an hour should be given to this practice if possible, but the student may begin with a quarter of an hour, as he will find the close attention a little exhausting at first. Any person who takes up this practice and follows it regularly for a few months will at the end of that time be conscious of a distinct growth of mental strength, and he will find himself able to deal with the ordinary problems of life far more effectively than heretofore. Nature is just paymistress, giving to each exactly the wages he has earned, but not an unearned farthing. Those who would have the wages of increased faculty must earn them by hard thinking. The work is twofold, as has been already pointed out. On the one side of the powers of consciousness are drawn out, on the other the forms through which it is expressed are developed, and the first of these must never be forgotten. Many people recognize the value of definite thinking as affecting the brain, but forget that the source of all thought is the unborn, undying self, and that they are only drawing out what they already possess. Within them is all power, and they have only to utilize it, for the divine self is the root of the life of each, and the aspect of the self, which is knowledge, lives in everyone, and is ever seeking opportunity for his own fuller expression. The power is within each, uncreate, eternal. The form is molded and changed, but the life is the man's self, illimitable in his powers. That power within each is the same power as shaped the universe. It is divine, not human, a portion of the life of the Logos, and inseparate from him. If this were realized, and if the student remembered that it is not the scantiness of the power, but the inadequacy of the instrument that makes the difficulty, he would often work with more courage and hope, and therefore with more efficiency. Let him feel that his essential nature is knowledge, and that it lies with him how far that essential nature shall find expression in this incarnation. Expression is, indeed, limited by the thinkings of the past, but can be now increased and made more efficient by the same power which in the past shaped the present. Forms are plastic and can be remolded, slowly, it is true, by the vibrations of the life. Above all, let the student remember that for steady growth, regularity of practice is essential. When a day's practice is omitted, 3 or 4 days' work are necessary to counterbalance the slipping back, at least during the earlier stages of growth. When the habit of steady thought is acquired, then the regularity of practice is less important. But until this habit is definitely established, regularity is of the utmost moment. For the old habit of loose drifting reasserts itself, and the matter of the mental body falls back into its old shapes, and has to be again shaken out of them on the assumption of the practice. Better 5 minutes of work done regularly than half an hour on some days and none on others. Worry, its meaning and eradication. It has been said truly enough that people age more by worry than by work. Work, unless excessive, does not injure the thought apparatus, but on the contrary, strengthens it. But the mental process known as worry definitely injures it, and after a time produces a nervous exhaustion and irritability which renders steady mental work impossible. What is worry? It is the process of repeating the same train of thought over and over again with small alterations coming to no result. It is the continued reproduction of thought forms initiated by the mental body and the brain, not by the consciousness, and imposed by them on the consciousness. As overtired muscles cannot keep still, but move restlessly even against the will, so do the tired mental body and brain repeat over and over again the very vibrations that have wearied them, and the thinker vainly tries to still them and thus obtain rest. Once more, automatism is seen, the tendency to move in the direction in which movement has already been made. The thinker has dwelt on a painful subject and has endeavored to reach a definite and useful conclusion. He has failed and ceases to think, but remains unsatisfied, wishing to find a solution and dominated by the fear of the anticipated trouble. This fear keeps him in an anxious and restless condition, causing an irregular outflow of energy. Then the mental body and brain, under the impulse of this energy and of the wish, but undirected by the thinker, continue to move and throw up the images already shaped and rejected. These are, as it were, forced on his attention, and the sequence recurs again and again. As weariness increases, irritability is set up and reacts again on the wearied forms, and so action and reaction continue in a vicious circle. The thinker is, in worry, the slave of his servant bodies and is suffering under their tyranny. Now, this very automatism of the mental body and brain, this tendency to repeat vibrations already produced, may be used to correct the useless repetition of thoughts that cause pain. When a thought current has made for itself a channel, a thought form, new thought currents tend to flow along the same track, that being the line of least resistance. A thought that causes pain readily thus recurs by the fascination of fear, as a thought that gives pleasure recurs by the fascination of love. The object of fear, the picture of what will happen when anticipation becomes reality, makes thus a mind channel, a mold for thought, and a brain track also. The tendency of the mental body and the brain, released from immediate work, is to repeat the form and to let unemployed energy flow into the channel already made. Perhaps the best way to get rid of a worry channel is to dig another, of an exactly opposite character. Such a channel is, as we have already seen, made by definite, persistent, regular thought. Let then a person who is suffering from worry give 3 or 4 minutes in the morning on first rising to some noble and encouraging thought. The self is peace. That self am I. The self is strength. That self am I. Let him think how, in his innermost nature, he is one with the Supreme Father. How in that nature he is undying, unchanging, fearless, free, serene, strong. How he is clothed in perishable vestures that feel the sting of pain, the gnawing of anxiety. How he mistakenly regards these as himself. As he thus broods, the peace will enfold him, and he will feel it is his own, his natural atmosphere. As he does this day by day, the thought will dig its own channel in mental body and in brain, and ere long, when the mind is loosed from labor, the thought of the self that is peace and strength will present itself unbidden and fold its wings around the mind in the very turmoil of the world. Mental energy will flow naturally into this channel, and worry will be of the past. Another way is to train the mind to rest on the good law, thus establishing a habit of content. Here the man dwells on the thought that all circumstances work within the law, and that naught happens by chance. Only that which the law brings to us can reach us, by whatever hand it may outwardly come. Nothing can injure us that is not our due, brought to us by our own previous willing and acting. None can wrong us, save an instrument of the law, collecting a debt due from us. Even if an anticipation of pain or trouble come to the mind, it will do well to face it calmly, accept it, agree to it. Most of the sting disappears when we acquiesce in the finding of the law, whatever it may be. And we may do this the more easily if we remember that the law works ever to free us by exacting the debt that keeps us in prison, and through it bring us pain. The pain is but the way to happiness. All pain, come it how it may, works for the ultimate bliss, and is but breaking the bonds which keep us tied to the whirling wheel of births and deaths. When these thoughts have become habitual, the mind ceases to worry, for the claws of worry can find no hold on that strong panoply of peace. Thinking and ceasing to think. Much gain of strength may be made by learning both to think and to cease thinking at will. While we are thinking, we should throw our whole mind into the thought and think our best. But when the work of thought is over, it should be dropped completely and not allowed to drift on vaguely, touching the mind and leaving it like a boat knocking itself against a rock. A man does not keep a machine running when it is not turning out work, needlessly wearing the machinery. But the priceless machinery of the mind is allowed to turn and turn aimlessly, wearing itself out without useful result. To learn to cease thinking, to let the mind rest, is an acquisition of greatest value. As the tired limbs luxuriate when stretched in repose, so may the tired mind find comfort in complete rest. Constant thinking means constant vibration. Constant vibration means constant waste. Exhaustion and premature decay result from this useless expenditure of energy, and a man may preserve both mental body and brain longer by learning to cease thinking, when thought is not being directed to useful result. It is true that ceasing to think is by no means an easy achievement. Perhaps it is even more difficult than thinking. It must be practiced for very brief periods until the habit is established, for it means at first an expenditure of force in holding the mind still. Let the student, when he has been thinking steadily, drop the thought, and as any thought appears in the mind, turn the attention away from it. Persistently turn away from each intruder. If need be, imagine a void as a step to quiescence, and try to be conscious only of stillness and darkness. Practice on these lines will become more and more intelligible if persisted in, and a sense of quiet and peace will encourage the student to persist. Nor should it be forgotten that the cessation of thought busied in outward activities is a necessary preliminary to work on the higher planes. When the brain has learned to be quiescent, when it no longer restlessly throws up the broken images of past activities, then the possibility opens of the withdrawal of the consciousness from its physical vesture and of its free activity in its own world. Those who hope to take this forward step within the present life must learn to cease thinking, for only when the modifications of the thinking principle are checked on the lower plane can freedom on the higher plane be obtained. Another way of giving the rest to the mental body and the brain, a far easier way than the cessation of thinking, is by change of thought. A man who thinks strenuously and persistently along one line should have a second line of thought as different as possible from the first, to which he can turn his mind for refreshment. The extraordinary freshness and youthfulness of a thought which characterized William Ewart Gladstone in his old age was largely the result of the subsidiary intellectual activities of his life. His strongest and most persistent thought went to politics, but his studies in theology and in Greek filled many a leisure hour. Truly he was but an indifferent theologian, and what he was as a Greek scholar I'm not competent to say. But though the world cannot be said to be much the richer for his theological pronouncements, his own brain was kept fresh and receptive by these and his Greek studies. Charles Darwin, on the other hand, lamented in his old age that he had allowed those of his faculties to atrophy by disuse that would have been concerned with subjects outside his own specialized work. Literature and art for him had no attraction, and he keenly felt the limitations he had imposed on himself by his over-absorption in one line of study. A man needs change of exercise in thought as well as in body, else he may suffer from mental cramp, as do some from writer's cramp. Especially, perhaps, is it important for men engaged in absorbing worldly pursuits that they should take up a subject which engages faculties of the mind not evolved in business activities related to art, science, or literature, in which they may find mental recreation and polish. Above all, the young should adopt some such pursuit, ere yet their fresh and active brains grow jaded and weary, and in age they will then find within themselves resources which will enrich and brighten their declining days. The form will preserve its elasticity for a much longer period of time when it is thus given rest by change of occupation. The secret peace of mind. Much of that which we have already studied tells us something of the way in which peace of mind may be ensured. But its fundamental necessity is the clear recognition and realization of our place in the universe. We are part of one great life, which knows no failure, no loss of effort or strength, which mightily and sweetly ordering all things, bears the worlds onward to their goal. The notion that our little life is a separate independent unit fighting for its own hand against countless separate independent units is a delusion of the most tormenting kind. So long as we thus see the world and life, peace broods far off on an inaccessible pinnacle. When we feel and know that all selves are one, then peace of mind is ours without any fear of loss. All our troubles arise from thinking of ourselves as separated units, and then revolving on our own mental axis, thinking only of our separate interests, our separate aims, our separate joys and sorrows. Some do this as regards the lower things of life, and they are the most dissatisfied of all, ever restlessly snatching at the general stock of material goods, and piling up useless treasures. Others seek ever their own separate progress in the higher life, good earnest people, but ever discontented and anxious. They are ever contemplating and analyzing themselves. Am I getting on? Do I know more than I did last year? And so on. Fretting for continual assurances of progress, their thoughts centered on their own inner gain. Peace is not to be found in the continual seeking for the gratification of the separated self, even though the gratification be of the higher kind. It is found in renouncing the separated self, in resting on the self that is one, the self that is manifesting at every stage of evolution, and in our stage as much as in every other, and is content in all. Desire for spiritual progress is of great value so long as the lower desires entangle and fetter the aspirant. He gains strength to free himself from them by the passionate longing for spiritual growth, but it cannot give happiness, which is only found when the separate self is cast away and the great self is recognized as that for the sake of which we are living in the world. Even in ordinary life, the unselfish people are the happiest, those who work to make others happy and who forget themselves. The dissatisfied people are those who are ever seeking happiness for themselves. We are the self, and therefore the joys and the sorrows of others are ours as much as theirs. And in proportion as we feel this and learn to live so that the whole world shares the life that flows through us, do our minds learn the secret of peace. He attaineth peace, into whom all desires flow as rivers flow into the ocean, which is filled with water, but remaineth unmoved, not he who desireth desire. Footnote from the Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 2, page 70. The more we desire, the more the craving for happiness, which is unhappiness, must grow. The secret of peace is the knowledge of the self, and the thought, that self am I, will help towards the gaining of a peace of mind that nothing can disturb. End of chapter. Please do, if you haven't done so yet, let me know you were here, hit that like button, and leave me a comment. What do you think about the power of concentration? And also, if you like what you see here or what you hear, please do subscribe. And if you'd like to get notified of future videos, do hit the bell. Let's head over to the next video where we're going to learn how to help others with our thoughts.